Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for our next speaker, and it is Ina Smith from the Academy of Science of South Africa. She is going to speak on the internationalizing of South African scholarly journals, all right? And I just want to give you a brief biography on Ina. Ina Smith specializes in the adoption of open science and open access in publishing the Global South with specific emphasis on Africa. She holds a master's degree from the University of Pretoria in Computer Integrated Education, a higher education teaching diploma, and an honors degree in library and information science. Ina has vast experience in working in open access during employment at the University of Pretoria and Stellenbosch University in repositories, journal publishing, and conference publishing. She is currently employed as a planning manager at the Academy of Science of South Africa, where she is working on a Department of Science and Technology, the Academy of Science of Africa, the International Council of Science University, and CoData project for an African open science platform. She is also a DOAG ambassador for the Southern African region. In 2014, she received the LIASA's President's Acknowledgement for Exceptional Contribution. In 2011, she was a runner-up in the International Electronic Publication Trust Award for Open Access. And in 2016, she was awarded the LIASA Librarian of the Year. She has a keen interest in the research process and in general, and are actively promoting all to become digital citizens, to remain lifelong researchers and self-learners. Translating difficult concepts into a digestible format for researchers to integrate into the day-to-day work is a passion of hers. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ina Smith. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for that introduction. First of all, a huge thanks to Faith and Joyce for inviting us to come and talk to you today on this very special day and a very important week in the calendar of scholarly publishing, because that's what we want to do. We want to advance access to our research, make it as open possible so that others can benefit from it, to find solutions to problems we face on ground level. And we cannot do it if the research is hidden behind passwords and usernames. So research needs to be open, especially when funded with taxpayers' money. And in the second instance, I want to commend and congratulate Alternation and all the other journals and the library for taking on the publishing of open access journals. That's exactly what we need to do on this continent, and I strongly believe this is where Africa can do science different from the rest of the world. Publishing our own in a high quality way, aligned with international criteria. I was asking Yanni just now, what is it his journal does, what he would have done different if it was published with Thomson & Reuters? And for the life of me, I cannot think of something myself. It would have costed him far more money, but the editor would still have done the work free of charge, the reviewers would have done the work free of charge, the platform, the service space comes at a minimal cost. So really the message personally I want to send out is that we can publish our own because of the internet, because of open source software such as OJS, and universities have the expertise to do so. We have IT experts. We have librarians who can assist in terms of metadata, knowledge management. We have editors, we have reviewers, all based at universities. and up to now, approximately 10 universities have started publishing their own. And we will continue to encourage the same practice across the continent. Also soon to present a workshop on OJS in Ethiopia in collaboration with the Ethiopian Academy of Science. It was completely coincidence, coming back to my presentation. It was completely coincidence that I called it internationalization or internationalizing South African scholarly journals. When I heard your DVC rector spoke about it this morning, I thought, gosh, he must have seen my speech or something, because he's saying everything, but you're now going to hear it for a second time. I want to start off with a question. Nature is published by Macmillan, which is part of Springer. I don't know where they are based in the world. It doesn't really matter. We're living in a global world. But it has the highest impact factor. Say, for instance, it's published in Germany. What if it was published in South Africa? Would it still have had the same high impact factor or not? You can think about that question and come to your own answer. But I know what I would think, or my answer would be. So in this presentation, I would like to just broadly speak from an ASAF perspective. What is an international journal? What is the criteria an international journal should adhere to? And how can you become a possibly international journal? The rationale, and for that I want to go back to the beginning. Why is it we still have scholarly journals? Why don't you just write an article, get two experts to peer review it, and then upload it to your repository, to your institutional repository? As easy as that. Why do you need a journal? And for that we need to go back to the origins. Why do we have scholarly scientific journals? According to the literature, the journal provides a platform to share new research, discoveries, encourage dialogue, and find solutions in a systematic way, in a coordinate way, not a haphazard way. It provides a permanent and transparent forum for presentation, scrutiny, discussion of research, usually and most of the time also with open access journals. All the papers should be peer-reviewed, whether blind peer-reviewed or double-blind peer-reviewed or open peer-reviewed, but it should be peer-reviewed. It applies to open access, definitely. And then, once published, the journal and the articles in the journal become part of the scientific record, so that new research can be built on existing research, so that you don't need to start from scratch. So another question to you is, if a research is hidden behind a username and password, how can you build on that research? Today, the publishing business started. I don't think we had journals when we had paper scrolls, but at least with the printing industry, we had journals. And the most early journal goes back to 1665, when the French journal Des Sçavans and the English Philosophical Transactions of a Royal Society first began systematically publishing research results. So 1665 is a very long time, so it's a very long tradition of sharing knowledge. More and more journals started publishing, and South Africa also joined with the South African Journal of Science, probably one of the oldest journals in the country. I think it's almost 112 years old now, and it's published by the Academy on behalf of the Department of Science and Technology. Publishing in a traditional way had its benefits, but it also had its advantages. So you can imagine printing on paper, it's costly, the ink, distribution, the delay in delivery, many challenges faced in the traditional ways of printing. And then also add to that, once you receive a journal, it ends up on your shelf, but it's not that well indexed, you can't search full text, and students tearing out papers and pages, and and journal issues disappearing. So it had its many challenges, but at least it had one benefit. You had a copy of the journal and you tried to look after it very well so that it won't disappear, so that people can benefit. But it changed with electronic publishing because when you subscribe, you would not receive a permanent copy. When you stop subscribing, you won't have access to that issues, to that journal anymore. So just to give you a sense of the benefits around traditional, but electronic publishing also has far more benefits. And traditional printing and publishing was disrupted. And we heard Tim Berners-Lee's name this morning already. And he's one of my favorite persons, my role models, if I have to choose one. I think if it wasn't for him, we would not have had the internet. We would not have anything we have today. And he was, as it says, the English computer scientist and inventor of the World Wide Web. That's part of the internet. Remember, the internet is far more than just the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is that part that contains the pages, the content, the information. The internet also consists of mail and mailing lists, etc. So we need to be clear on our vocabulary when we talk about these things. Well, in his initial speech, when this World Wide Web was launched, Tim Berners-Lee said, "The World Wide Web project aims to allow all links to be made to any information anywhere. The World Wide Web project was started to allow high-energy physicists to share data, news, and documentation. We are very interested in spreading the web to other areas and having gateway servers for other data. Collaborators welcome," and that's what happened. So this was his announcement in 1991, and nobody could have expected how much the internet would indeed grow. Today, and as was said, I'm working on a project, the African Open Science Platform Project, where we are looking at data. What happens to the data underlying the research, that evidence, that's proof of the outcomes being published? In today's days and times of fake news, fake research, we need evidence. So more and more we need to start thinking, what do our students do with the data underlying their thesis, their dissertations, and also researchers' articles in this case? 25 years later, unfortunately, Tim Berners-Lee had to make another announcement in 2014. "I believe that the future of the web is under threat from some governments that may abuse their powers, some businesses that may try to undermine the open market, and from criminal activity." So going from this slide, publishers saw the internet as an opportunity to profit. Think back of what the original intent of research is supposed to be, to find solutions to problems on the ground. And then these business practices being implemented to profit from research funded with taxpayers' money. Libraries, I've spoken to Faith this morning, libraries all over South Africa, all over the world, the Harvards of the world have to cancel subscriptions to these very expensive databases because they cannot afford it any longer. In South Africa, we are challenged with a weak rand, the exchange rate, etc. So academic publishers reaping huge benefits and huge profits as libraries go broke. So there's something hugely wrong with this direction things are taking. If you also look at this slide, not only do publishers benefit from subscription fees when libraries subscribe to their very expensive databases, which in between brackets for me is incredibly user unfriendly. I think it's done on purpose, but they also benefit from huge amounts paid by researchers in order to get articles published. In other words, for article publishing charges. According to this JISC study, Elsevier generates more revenue from both subscriptions and APCs than any other publishers. And to just give you an example, on the 13th of October, Peter Suber, one of the gurus, one of the leaders internationally, he is at Harvard University, he's the director of the Open Scholarship Office, tweeted this tweet. The heading was Relaxing Storm Tops Industry Rich List. So to see exactly how much money, this will give you an idea. The CEO salaries for Engstrom, who is the CEO of Elsevier, $14.2 million per year. Smith, the CEO of Thomson Reuters, $13.4 million per year. But Elsevier comes out at the top every time. For me, if we put those monies together, we can subsidize subscriptions for the whole of South Africa, maybe even Africa. So that's maybe drastic. But anyway, negotiations between universities and other leaders in research were also not successful, and it's not as if universities did not try. Researchers tried, not even libraries, tried negotiating with publishers. But the end result now, very recently, on the 12th of October, this news item was shared. German scientists resigned from Elsevier Journal's editorial boards. Elsevier might appoint new editorial editors, but it was more a message, a certain message that these editors wanted to send out to the world. And then it also made me think, another question, what is South Africa doing? Are we just continuing to pay? I take my hat off for those who are brave enough to protest and to cancel subscriptions to these very expensive databases. And there's a few in South Africa that have done so. And the beauty of it, there's repositories such as BASE. I don't know if you know BASE, B-A-S-E. But if you want to find an article, go to the BASE repository. BASE is a German-driven repository, a harvester. What it does, it harvests all the repositories all over the world. And as with UKZN, what we try to do with repositories is to upload a second copy of any article in the repositories. And initially it was difficult to sell repositories to librarians. Susan is the champion. She initiated open access in South Africa. It was incredibly difficult, and we are so proud of repositories on the continent growing, because finally we can see the benefit of repositories. If you go to BASE and you enter a title for an article, a subscription article, the chances are good that you might find it there, because all libraries have committed themselves to upload at least second copies of articles to the repositories. It might not be the final published version, it might be the preprint or the postprint, but at least something. And the other day I attended a CREST conference at Stellenbosch University, and one of the researchers put up his hand and he said never in his life has he paid for an article, and he has no intentions to ever pay for an article. If he wants to get hold of a full text, he would email the author of that article, and in all instances so far, the author would gladly email him a copy of the article. So why do we still have subscriptions, is my question. Should libraries not rather invest their times and efforts in other things? So just a sideline, asking more questions this morning to myself than anything else. But anyway, moving on. The open access movement started around 2002 when researchers realized that things are going wrong now. It's ended up in publishers' hands, and on the long term, we will not be able to afford it. This is not sustainable for us. So during the Budapest Open Access Initiative, it was decided that scholars need the means to launch a new generation of journals committed to open access and to help existing journals that elect to make the transition to open access? Why put your journal in the hands of a commercial publisher benefiting from your hard work, which you do free of charge, just because they might assign you an impact factor based on the number of citations for all 20, the average for number of citations for all 20 articles, not even one specific article, saying nothing about the quality of the content, the impact it had in solving those problems on the ground. Really, so as the DVC said this morning, we need a change in thinking, in how we approach this. So with that came OJS, Open Journal Systems, and we heard what Yanni shared with us this morning. Open Journal Systems, I strongly believe in open source software also, empowering people, empowering Africa, making us less dependent on the West and other countries. We can teach ourselves to do this just as well as the Elsevier's and the Thomson Reuters do the job. So OJS is a journal management and publishing system and a website, all in one. It's licensed as open source software, which means it can never be sold. It will be open forever. It's developed by the Public Knowledge Project, PKP, and the Simon Fraser University in Canada. Already, you're using OJS, an international software. Doesn't that make your journal partly international? Okay. It consists of a community of developers. We have talent in Africa, in South Africa. I've seen with the data, the African Open Science Project, programmers, developers that can upskill themselves and give back so that Africa doesn't always look like the beggars and the receivers. Let's start giving back also. It can be downloaded and installed on a local server, and that's what you did at UKZN, and most recently a very funky modern version has been released. So I hope you will also upgrade soon. And as it was shared this morning, I'm also very much in debt to Carol Bertram from Pietermaritzburg campus, professor in education. Yes, and she really, when she first heard, I think it was for the past 2 years, she's been nagging us, please, when can we have this? When can we move our journal to OJS? Can't you help us? And finally, thanks to the library, they got together and they organized a training event 5 months ago. And what you've seen this morning, shared by Yanni, was the result of training, and within 5 months, he managed to make that transition. I agree, there's still lots of work to do, lots of learning, but you've taken the biggest step, and that mind change was the biggest step, I think, in my opinion. So well done to UKZN and to all the journals moving online. So the benefits of OJS, you install it. You have universities, for me, are sustainable institutions. A university doesn't open and in 6 months' time it closes again. That's something that can easily happen with a third party, with a small publisher, with a small service provider. For me, universities are sustainable. It's a safe house to publish your journal with. The editors have so much control. The online submission system, once you get the hang of it, it's very easy. It provides a central archive. You can upload retrospective, like with South African Journal of Science. I think all our copies from the first issue is available online already, and they plan to move to OJS also because it's more financially sustainable. We don't have the funding to afford Scholar One anymore. And the two compare very well. So it allows for comprehensive indexing of a journal content, the full text. It allows for nice plug-ins so you can add stuff to your web page. Email notifications, very valuable. It really reduces the work of the editor once the editor has a good grasp of the software. Like I've said, it builds capacity on the continent. The more we can get universities to grow their skills, the more they can share their expertise, and the more it can just expand across the continent. So, and it reduces dependency on commercial, very expensive systems. Yes, and it allows for flexible publishing frequency. You had a question earlier about publishing one issue in 2 years. We have many journals that publish once the article is ready. They don't even wait for the whole issue to be ready. They create the issue, and when the first article is ready, it has been peer-reviewed, it has been proofread, copy edited, everything is perfect, the layout. They publish it, because the sooner it's put out in the open, the sooner it can have an impact, the sooner it can start generate citations and downloads. So you're not limited to wait for your printed issue to have its 10 articles and then only print it. So it addresses all those things that I could hear is puzzling you or questions you had. So far, OJS is hugely implemented. I think when I checked a year ago, 132 titles. It's far more now, and across the world. But you can see Africa very bleak, not only in terms of sharing its science, its research, but also adopting these systems. So if we complain about what we have to use and being dependent on expensive databases, we have ourselves to blame. We must start doing research, sharing research, writing articles, document our indigenous knowledge. We must start doing it while there's still people with that knowledge, that tacit knowledge around. So the ASAF approach to internationalization is that ASAF, in a cycle of 5 years, we conduct peer reviews of all 300 plus South African scholarly journals, according to the discipline groups. So then we evaluate it, we appoint panels who are experts in the field, and they would scrutinize the content of the journal, as well as the technical things also, but then they would make recommendations for the journal to improve, and whether they should be included in Sihalo South Africa. And Sihalo South Africa, a Brazilian software which we use, and on which we index 65 of the top South African scholarly journals. And Sihalo South Africa, in turn, is also on the Web of Science, which makes it also more international. So what is there that's not international about South African journals? If you use open source software that's been developed internationally, if you are indexed internationally, if you apply international practices. We also conducted an analysis of the criteria used by the 6 DHET approved indexes. If you know, okay, the DHET has the index in order for you to receive funding from articles authored. So there's the DHET criteria, there's the Sihalo South Africa criteria. All Sihalo South Africa journals are by default approved for funding by the DHET. There's also the Norwegian list, only level 2. Okay, there's level 1 and 3, but only level 2 journals. No, 0, 1, and 2. Only level 2 journals are acknowledged. You will receive funding for those. And then there's the Web of Science journals. Then there's the Scopus journals. I think that's it. Those are the 6 lists. So what we did, we had a look at the criteria, and we compared the criteria. And we listed it, and we categorized it. And I'm going to quickly take you through it, because those criteria coming from international indexes are things that we can easily integrate into our own South African and African journals. Of course, in terms of information about the journal, the identity of a journal, the journal title, any alternative titles or former titles of the journal should be well documented on the web page. The web page should be preferably be online. It should be, because if it's not online, it doesn't exist. And if it's not open online, in my view, it exists even less. So for your journal to have any existence, it needs to be online and preferably open. So it how do you publish your journal? Is it just a web page, a flat web page of which the full text is not necessarily indexed? Or are you using something like OJS, which is a journal management system? with an electronic workflow. Just like you would have a repository with an electronic workflow, the same way you have a journal management system so that you can relate. What's the key journal abbreviation registered internationally? What's the discipline? It should be clear from that web page. Who is the title owner and what is the mailing address? Who's the publisher? And when we talk about publisher, where is the publishing, the peer review management, not the peer review itself, the management of the peer review, the business development and the production of the journal conducted in which country? And it's also for the DHET to understand which journals and for us to monitor what's happening in terms of scholarly publishing in South Africa. Also provide a journal description, the history, document the history from the start, all the editors through the years, and their names, and whether they passed away or whatever, so that we can see this is not a fly-by-night, a questionable journal that just started existing last year. So acknowledge that your journal has been in existence a while. The aims, focus, and scope should be very clear. Of course, the journal can also be available, continue with print, although it's online. But more and more we found that journals who've moved online would drop the print gradually. Is it an open access online journal or a subscription journal? It must be clear. If your journal changes title, it must be registered with the international ISSN registry in France through the National Library. Once again, another international component. So a print copy should have a different ISSN than the online ISSN. Publication frequency, very important, no interruptions. If you, on your webpage, under About, say that your journal publishes 10 articles per year, then there must be 10 articles. If you say you publish 4 issues with 5 articles each per year, then there must be 4 issues. Just stick to that. Yes, and you can manage your journal. It's very flexible, the software itself, OJS, but the way you manage your journal will differ from one journal to another. Articles should at least be in PDF. Also XML, if you want to make it more international and more visible for robots, for search engines. There should be digital object identifiers, like you have your South African ID, a journal has an ISSN, a book has an ISBN, an article can also become an independent entity being emailed back and forth. It should have a DOI, a digital object identifier, accompanying it so that it can be cited correctly and the citation can be tracked. Org IDs, you as researchers, just like you have your South African ID, also have a researcher ID so that people can see you're using various forms of your name, but you are the same person. It's linked to one ID number, all those variants of your name. So very important, it's free of charge. Page numbers, embargoes, on the article itself indicate when was the paper accepted, reviewed, published. What, is there author-publisher agreement in place? Linked data, more and more important. Data-driven articles, more and more important, where articles link to data sets, for examples. The software also leaves an audit trail. Should an article be rejected, or should it become should it be questioned after it has been published? At least you have an audit trail to demonstrate that this article was signed off by this submitter electronically. It was signed by this editor. It was peer-reviewed by 2 experts in the field. So somewhere there must be accountability also. So yes, there's some general things, and libraries can play a great role in terms of metadata, enriching those articles so it's even more visible internationally. So yes, okay, I've done that one. And then author affiliation should be very clear on that article itself. So do you want to allow us up to make changes? No? That's what I see, sorry. Okay. And then what's the digital preservation strategy you have in place for your journal? Ideally, our National Library of South Africa should be the owner and responsible for digitally preserving all our scholarly journals. But in the meantime, at ASAF, it's being done by Portugal. We have an agreement with Portugal on a different continent. So should disaster strike South Africa, which is hopefully not going to happen, our journals are safe. Okay, so in terms of our articles' content, I just want to highlight one. Once again, data sets. The prominent researchers, and the one I've already named, has already indicated publicly that they don't mind, they're not going to care that much about articles. I'm under correction. I haven't seen the quote or the article myself. It was communicated during a conference I attended. They have indicated that their next golden egg is data. So before that happens, we as research institutions funded with taxpayers' money need to think, how do we manage our data? What do we do with our data? Because data is becoming the new oil. And as you can see with Facebook, Twitter, it consists of data. There's no tangible thing. It's maybe a couple of servers somewhere. But we're contributing data all the time to LinkedIn, to all those online social platforms. Data is the new gold, where the new money is. So be prepared. And OJS also allows for a plug-in called Dataverse, where the author of an article can upload his or her data sets. Peer review process, I've mentioned that. And then also 75% of contributions for an issue, whether it's an issue, one issue a year or 4 issues, should be beyond the single institution. You can think for yourself. If all your articles come from researchers at UKZN, it's not going to be really trusted. You need to involve more than just your own institution, and preferably international researchers also. Financial sustainability, how do you make sure your journal would survive financially? One form of surviving is APCs, article processing charges. 400 Rand a page is not much. With help from the DVC research, just maybe, there's not much to fund. The funding is the server space. It's maybe the copy editor or proofreader that needs to be paid. But the rest is done free of charge because you're using open source software. The editor was never paid, reviewers never paid, the submitter never paid. So therefore, what are your costs in the end? And similar to rewarding the publishing of articles in the 6 indexes, maybe our DVC research should consider making funding available to publish our own journals. It won't be that much money. DOIs would cost a few dollars. But at Stellenbosch University already, Professor Eugene Klutter is supporting the publishing of Sun journals and all Stellenbosch University journals through OJS, so that the cost can be kept as low possible for the journal. I know in the Arabic countries, I have a colleague there, and he has indicated that when a journal charges APCs, for them it's questionable. It makes the journal look predatory because the journal wants to make money. But we are realistic. The journal does have some expenses which we need to cover. Okay, so we want the journals to be fully searchable. The full text must be online, and it must be able to be retrieved by Google. We know Google is not the best, but that is what people use when they do research. And also in addition to other indexes and other search engines. Also monitor the downloads of your articles, how it's being cited, and there are various tools available to do it. Have clear guidelines on your journal page for your authors, your reviewers, your libraries who wants to upload a second copy into the repository, etc. And then policies and statements. Your journal needs to be managed in a transparent way. So there's many policies which you can include just to make sure you cover all. But very important for us is, for example, the peer review policy and also retractions policy, the ethics and malpractice statement policy. What will you do if you encounter this kind of thing? So what measures have you taken? A policy can be 1 or 2 sentences. It doesn't need to be a whole document. Also, there's the copyright policy. Who owns the copyright? In open access, the copyright belongs to the original intellectual property owner, the author or authors. How can this article be used? That speaks to licensing, Creative Commons license specifically. So how can they use this? So you need a copyright policy and a licensing policy, and there's the peer review policy, and then also the open access policy, and also include that crawling is allowed by harvesters. So, and the DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journals, has a very well formulated open access policy, which you can learn from. Okay, there's also journals that have a gender, racial and language policy. For example, the South African Crime Quarterly Journal, they have to report on those issues, and therefore they have a disclaimer, waiver policies, etc. What's the roles and responsibilities of the different role players? And I want to highlight the editorial board that more than 2/3 should be beyond the single institution, and preferably international members to serve on the editorial board, making your journal even more international. Okay, academic integrity. I think we all, as researchers, have a responsibility to monitor how our names, our research are being used. So we should take ownership of our own academic integrity and be proactive, follow our personal digital footprint, but also that of the journals. Set up alerts, Google alerts, for all the articles published, and know who cites your work and in which context it is used. Assign good quality metadata so that Google will return your articles at the top of the list. And also conduct Google searches of your own name, journal articles, and see where it has been mentioned, and know what is being researched in your field and what are high-quality journals. And don't allow your journal to end up on a list referring to questionable journals. You don't want your journal on such a list, and then take action if needed. And then you are welcome to register, although I'm completely not in favor of impact factor. You're welcome to go through the process, get feedback, input, have your journal evaluated through Web of Science, Elsevier, and there's the links with the criteria, with the application form. So please do apply and see what's the outcome. Elsevier Scopus, Google Scholar Metrics, Google Scholar Profile, and also register your journal page as a website on Google. And also then approach your librarian, ask her to advise in which indexes can you have your journal registered, discipline specific. And also on the Directory of Open Access Journals, the more indexes you submit your journal through, the more it's being subjected to evaluation, the more you can improve. You have nothing to lose. And also then a deposit policy on SHIP or Romeo. And there's just the page, Video AJ page. Market your journal, market your articles. If there's a hot topic like fracking, and when we started our repository, the report on fracking in the Karoo was just released, and we could not just rely on the report being there on the repository. It's good, but it's not enough. Google will pick it up. But we pushed the link. We pushed it to all the social media platforms, to the newspapers. We are fortunate to have a media person who also informs the media. But you're not always that lucky. Maybe you can consult with your librarian to help with that part. But yes, push it to the social media. A Facebook page, a Twitter page, a Google Plus page. Those are the things that international journals engage in. Have an add this toolbar to your OJS on article level so that people can easily share it. And also maybe YouTube recordings. Maybe you can have a recording with one of the authors of one of the nice articles and submit it and link from your journal. Be creative. Use tools in across one. Don't just rely on one tool. It won't have everything you need. Use many tools to complement your journal. Okay, so and measure the journal impact. And when I talk about impact, I don't talk about Thomson Reuters impact. You want to see what changes your journal lead to and your articles that you publish. So you can have in OJS, it has an analytics system that track your usage. You can have Google Scholar track your usage. You can create a Google profile, and this has been very helpful for our journals. They create a profile. Instead of creating a profile for a researcher, you create it for a journal. And then you populate it with all the articles published in that journal. And then Google Scholar tells you who have cited it. So why do you need a very fancy system to tell you? And to add, this is open, and it picks up everything that's open. And use your citations. Have a Google Analytics account. And yes, and monitor, start from a certain year, start now and continue to monitor the impact and the usage. So my conclusion, what for us is an international journal? It's an online open access journal that uses open source software and is managed in a transparent way. It's a journal that's aligned with international agreed criteria, the ones we've compared. It's a journal that's registered with indexes all over the world, with subject discipline indexes. It doesn't have to be Web of Science. It's a journal of which you monitor the downloads, the citations, all the articles in the journal cited internationally, not just by South Africans or by one group of people, the same group of people. It's a journal that's being marketed international. Librarians can maybe help increase the visibility. Tell the world about this journal in South Africa. Tell the world and ask other libraries in the world to add your journal titles to the A to Z lists. It's a journal of which the editorial board, the reviewers, the authors are international where possible. So on this note, thank you and all the best with making your journals become international. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will welcome any comments or questions to Ina, please.
Do you think journals are going to be a thing of the past in the next couple of years? I heard you say that what if people just publish things to their own publishing site? I mean, it's very easy for me. I mean, I've got a ResearchGate page, I've got an ORCID number. I can just publish my own research there and get 2 peer reviews to review the article and put it at the bottom of the article. And that's the same thing that journals do anyway, publishing houses do. So why not just do that? And I mean, what we can actually get in the next 10 years is people publishing research all the time free of charge. You heard the Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor say this morning, we give it out to publishing houses, they take the copyright and then sell it back to us. So do you think that's going to be the future now for us to publish our own research and our own research pages and get rid of journals and publishing houses and all these things that just cost us money?
Yeah, it's unpredictable and nothing stops you from doing it. But a lot of things will have to change before that can happen, because it will also impact on the reviewing system. Will it still be, what is it for DHET? In the end, money talks. This is what the DHET at this stage requires, that you publish in one of those 6 what entitles in one of those 6 indexes. So if you're just going to publish on your web page, you're not going to get that 118 or 150,000 rand. So we will need a change in the science system, the national science system in its entirety. And I think Susan Veldsman will talk about that this afternoon. So, and I would like her to add to that. But there's a possibility. Already we're seeing mega journals where there's one journal and journals from any discipline can be submitted there. And the reviewers appointed the same way as always. So instead of having this fragmented journals, having just one collective journal, I can't see it could change. Yes, it's possible. I can't say a definite yes or no, but a lot of research and a lot of convincing will have to go into this, because currently the DHET makes the rules, and that's the main income stream for the universities to continue their research. Susan, do you want to add something? Susan wants to add something now. That's good.
Thank you for that question. That is actually quite a thought-provoking question. I actually think in some ways it is actually starting to happen, even if it's just in a little way. It's showing the notion of to be sort of publisher lists. The DVC mentioned this morning about the Gates Foundation that publishes the articles that emanated from from funded research or for which they gave grants. It's not just them, it's also the Wellcome Trust. And now the European Union, you know, they're extremely large on publishing open access manuscripts, etc. And that's what they do. They guarantee very quick turnaround time, high-level peer review, and they publish it on their platforms. I mean, their platforms is just a place, but it's not associated with a particular publisher, etc. So I think, you know, there's some things already happening out there that it's sort of faceless in terms of a publisher, but that it's prominent and core and a part of a whole suite of high-level research output as such. Thank you.
And I think if publishers continue the way they continue and doing business the way they do business and not be open for negotiation, this might be the disruptor who makes that change towards doing away with journals. So, yeah.
I just want to add 2 points. You see, in South Africa, if you're a journal editor of an association or like Alternation, where we are based at the university, doesn't matter who you are as an editor, the university where you are based. So, for example, if I'm the editor of Association for Study of Religion in Southern Africa, I'm giving that over to another one at another university. So we have to comply with the legal requirements of the university. That's the law. So you are protected by the law. It's not, you know, you have to meet the requirements, but you also are protected by the institution at which the journal is based for the time being or whatever. That's one point. The other point is networking. If you publish just on a site, who's ever going to know about you? And as it is going on this online networking at the moment, people are never going to know. I mean, people quote people who belong to certain thematic networks. If you see somebody else outside a network or your network or whatever that's interesting, obviously you will quote that person. But otherwise you remain out in the cold. So you have to plug in somewhere.
Just want to add a little bit on that point that you've raised, Prof, and that is that institutions will have to have a look at the intellectual property rights at the different institutions in terms of their policies. What are the policies that university states in terms of the research outputs in this regard? I think the University of Cape Town is quite progressive on this. They have different categories, and like, for instance, the copyright of the authors of particular manuscripts, etc. It is the author's copyright. It's not the institution's copyright. So they can do with it pretty much what they want to do with it. If I can put it that's a very wild statement that I'm making, but I think you get what I'm saying, is that they can actually retain the copyright themselves and doesn't have to consult on the university as to what they have to do with that particular copyright. So I also think there's another layer in open access publishing that institutions will have to look at, and that is the intellectual property rights policies of the institution. What belongs to the university and what belongs to the author. And that will sort of clear out any disagreements, etc., that might actually occur.
And the same applies to data. You know, we're talking articles, but we're facing that with data also. Sure.
Just briefly. UCT, I think, is ahead of the rest of the universities. At the moment, the copyright is vested with the university. So officially, the university has the copyright, or the journal under the university. That is how it is officially in the country. But say, for example, you publish something with us, and an anthology wants to republish an article, or you want to use some of it and republish somewhere else or whatever. You just ask us, and we give you the permission. The thing is that you are protected under the system. But no money is being paid if you want to use your own research or republish it and so on. We've published many articles in anthologies or other books that people, you know, want to, you know, use as a chapter or whatever, you know, whatever. So you know, you're free to do that. So ultimately, the reality is, copyright stay in the possession of the author. That's the reality. And UCT, I think, they are putting the legal systems in place to recognize that.
And the copyright owner of a journal? Who is the copyright owner of a journal in your case? Also, but you have copyright for articles, and then you have copyright for the journal itself. So the university remains the copyright owner of a journal also. Okay, and the articles, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
And sorry, just to change topic, you mentioned peer review many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the ways we actually know that our research is actually sound and able to be put out into the public domain.
Yeah.
But I don't know of any journal who publishes the reviewers' names with that article. And I've seen some terrible articles come out by some good journals, and I'm wondering how did this actually get past the peer review process? And I think this is why I say if you publish on your own journal website, I could put Albert Einstein actually reviewed my paper and there's his comments. So people actually know now Albert Einstein thinks Kubnali's research is actually good, and people are going to read it. And just to come back to how do they actually get your research, I mean, you type my buzzwords into Google, and you're much more likely to pick up my journal than go to the Elsevier website or the Springer Nature or any other website. So I think the world is changing. And I think DHET and the universities need to change with the world.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
our own system of PUs and all the other things need to change and keep up with what's going on.
Yeah, and open peer review is now more and more introduced, where a reviewer who did a proper job should not be ashamed of his name being associated with an article. So, but on the other hand, if I know this article is not good or I haven't read it, I would not necessarily want to put my name to it. You know, if I haven't properly reviewed it. So I can imagine some resistance from peer reviewers, something to hide, who's not for naming and shaming. But good quality articles won't have a problem, I think, mentioning the reviewers.
Thank you. Thank you again for that question. That is interesting. I think that's the next level of development that we're already seeing that's happening, and that is open peer review. So with the South African Journal Science, we took our big toe and we put it into this troubled water of peer review, and we're already going into an open peer review process. So I think ultimately what we'd like to do is actually publish the peer reviewers' names against that particular article. So I think you'll see in my particular presentation, we talk a little bit about open science, and that's a typical development within open science is where you just throw everything open and everything you do, and you're transparent as to who has actually peer reviewed it, what was the time lapse between when you received it, when you published it, etc. So it's here, it's in South Africa, and you will observe it, I think, in going forward in terms of journals as such.
And I want to take it further and say maybe the peer review reports should also be open. If somebody wants to view peer review reports, why not? If you make the reviewer's name open, why not reports also? So be transparent all the way. What do you have to hide?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions. Ina, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for a great talk.